Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. It's Jeff, it's Eric, it's Drew with you here on Wednesday, September 15th in the evening. Gentlemen, it is now official. UCF is a member of the Big 12 Conference, or not yet. They will be in no later than 2024. And we got football, Friday Night Football to preview with Louisville. It's a busy, it's a busy show. We got lots to talk about. Bryson Turner is going to be by with us later. But first, let's talk about what is happening on the field with UCF football. 63 points against Bethune-Cookman on Saturday. Started off a little bit slow, hit the gas pedal a little bit later. I thought that, we learned some things that I think a little bit more about what Gus wants to do offensively and also a little bit defensively as well, which you tend to do in a game where, you eventually throw in your scout teamers. But Eric, I'll start with you. 2-0 start. Can't argue with that. One against a pretty good opponent, one against FCS. I know how you thought it kept saying.
It was a good practice. Good practice. There's nothing wrong with having a good practice.
What did we learn?
What do we learn? We haven't learned anything yet. We're going to start learning things this Friday. That's what we're going to start learning. I didn't learn a darn thing from Saturday, except, they scored a lot of points on a FCS team. I'm fascinated by this game. I'm curious how this team will respond on the road. I think the one thing I will say we've learned, I think this defense is better. It's better than it was last year. They're not giving up chunk of yardage. I know Drew will get into maybe still has some tackling issues, and that certainly could be a factor Friday night against Malik Cunningham in Louisville. But I do think this defense is better, Drew. It's much more sound, at least through two games. I will say that's what I've seen. Like under 300 yards in defensively. It seems like they know their assignments, even if they haven't executed it perfectly.
Well, they don't give up the big play as much as last year. Last year, they were generally kind of lost. But I think part of that problem was just the setup. You had a nickel defense running constantly. You had two linebackers that were just covering too much real estate. And then you had too much youth in the defensive backfield that just really were out of position. This year, the defensive backfield is still having a lot of problems, but they're being compensated for by a defensive front that's not making sacks, but causing QB hurries and throwaways that are really helping mitigate some of the flaws that we're seeing in the defensive backfield. They're playing incredibly soft. They're keeping everything in front of them, which, that takes away the deep ball, but they're getting underneath. They're doing cross routes, slants, and Bethune-Cookman converted a lot of third downs. I mean, a ridiculous amount of third downs. And that's got to be concerning because that's not an offense that should have been doing what they were doing.
Yeah, I want to bring up that number that you were specifically talking about. Third down conversions, Bethune was 7 of 15, and 1 of 1 on fourth downs as well.
I'd like to point out that they were over 50% in the first half. It wasn't until later in the game when the defense really started teeing off on them. And they ran out of that offense just kind of gassed out. You saw the difference in the depth and the talent, and they just couldn't keep up. And that's when they started getting 3 and outs and stuff. But before that, they were converting a lot of third downs. They were actually out converting UCF early, for a good chunk of that game.
Some key individual numbers. Dylan Gabriel was 23 of 36 for 312 and 2 touchdowns. He was sacked once. Trillion Coles was actually the leading rusher, 11 carries, 78 yards in mop-up duty, including a touchdown. Good for him. Came back from that Achilles injury and had himself a really good game. Isaiah Bowser, 59 yards. Is that a school record tying 4 touchdowns, Drew?
School record time, but no one ever did it in one half.
Right. He did it in one half.
He did it one half, but I also want to throw out that Trillion Coles had a receiving touchdown as well.
Yeah.
So that kid's been chomping at the bit, missed 2019 with a ruptured Achilles, bad injury to come back from, and just absolutely tore it up. It was funny. He was the last guy in post-game interviews, and no one recognized who he was. It was the weirdest moment.
Poor Trill.
I felt bad. Fair. Well, it kind of came out of nowhere. We thought, Big Cat Bryant was the last guy. We thought it was done. And all of a sudden Trillion Coles comes out and we're like, but I got to give Brandon Helwig with UCF Sports a lot of credit. He handled that really well and really got the ball rolling on a good set of interviews.
Yeah. One of the things I thought that was a little bit interesting was clearly Bethune-Cookman's game plan was we're not going to bother really trying to run the ball at all. We're just going to try and throw, and we're going to get the ball out quick. And their quarterback, Shannon Patrick, I thought did a pretty good job of throwing in rhythm and hitting guys, in rhythm right off the bat. He was 27 of 48 for 238, 2 touchdowns, 1 bad interception that he threw on kind of a broken play. But Drew, did you see that too? I thought that they did that for the most part. They pretty much executed their game plan pretty well in terms of trying to pick on guys by getting the ball out quick. That worked.
Well, if you recall, one of the things that we talked about in the game preview was expect them to throw the ball a lot. They were going to be playing from behind for starters, which usually means more passing. And UCF's front line just absolutely was so much stronger than Bethune's offensive line. And run offense, when the run offense requires the O-line to have explosive blocking, which is a strength characteristic, and they didn't have the strength to go up against UCF's defensive line. Pass blocking is agility based, and smaller guys tend to have that agility and can hold the pocket in for a couple seconds. Add that to the soft coverage that the defensive backs of UCF were giving, and you had a lot of underneath stuff that was really quick. They did a lot of crossovers, coming in, and slants and plays like that, a lot of stops and hooks and comebacks. Basically a lot of things that utilize that gap that the secondary was giving them. And, there was at times where it looked like they were going to start pressing the coverage a bit, and then they stopped. And, I would have figured against Bethune would be the chance to, try new things. Like Eric says, it's a scrimmage. It was not a scrimmage, but
it's a scrimmage. Come on. What terrible program would lose to an FCS program? Oh, never mind.
Oh, was that too soon for that?
Who started that game by? Oh, Miguel, one that Mackenzie Milton started, by the way. Ooh.
Oh, Florida State. Ooh, man, too soon.
Yeah, sorry, too soon. Well, let's spin this forward. Let's spin this forward a second here. So UCF plays Louisville Friday night, 7:30 Eastern kick on ESPN. Louisville is 1-1. They beat Eastern Kentucky 30-3 last week. Lost to Ole Miss on ESPN in Atlanta, 43-24. The line right now is UCF by 7. 76% of the money is on that. Over under 67.5, 61% on the over. And the key for Louisville right now has been their quarterback to this point, Malik Cunningham, who's throwing 61%, 469 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And he's the team's second leading rusher with 108 total yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So I'll ask both of you guys, and Drew, I want to start with you. Where does what we've seen fit in against Louisville? Like, what do you have to do against a quarterback like that, Drew?
Well, Cunningham is a very quick quarterback. He's not a Lamar Jackson, but he's kind of a poor man's scaled down version. You may have to end up spying a little bit, because you're going to have the defensive line trying to crash that pocket, which is going to usually leave the middle of the field open a little bit. Now that you're running more of a 4-3 with two locked-in linebackers and that flex Knight position, you may have to move around and spy a little bit more because he's so prone to tuck and run. They're going to have to put pressure on, and the key and the key really is to come around the back of on the pocket, those defensive ends. We know that Trayvon Morris-Brash is back with the team. We don't know what his playing status is, but he's back with the team. So, I mean, there's a possibility he could find the field Friday, but you need someone, not only just Big Cat Bryant, but you need someone on the other side. And, Anthony Montalvo is a good defensive tackle, hasn't quite translated as a defensive end. And it's, him coming on the quarterback's right side, that's traditionally a side of strength. It could lead to problems with tucking and running, just going around that right side when the pocket starts to move.
Eric, what you watched Cunningham in that game against Ole Miss, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
What challenge does he present this defense?
Well, he's a dual threat quarterback, and I think that's what I'm fascinated about is UCF in recent past has struggled against dual threat quarterbacks. And if they want to win the American Conference Championship, odds are they're going to have to go through a dual threat quarterback, Desmond Ridder, who has killed UCF. So I think to me, this is a good test. With Cunningham, he's a great athlete. The thing with Malik right now, doesn't have a ton around him, a lot of youth around him, not a great running game right now. I mean, Jalen Mitchell is their big back, but really Malik has been more, kind of their guy in the goal line and touchdowns. The receiving game, they got a young receiver and, Josh Johnson, Bruce Huggins is a freshman. So I think they're still trying to sort themselves out. Scott Satterfield, the head coach, there's a lot of pressure on him because of last year. He took the interview at South Carolina and kind of admitted that. So they had a down year last year. Defensively, they kind of got torched by Ole Miss, but a lot of teams get torched by Ole Miss. But to me, we're going to learn a lot about this UCF defense. I want to see how they handle the dual threat in Cunningham and the approach that Travis Williams will have for a player like Cunningham, because under Randy Shannon, UCF had no answers for any dual threat quarterbacks during his time here.
They never adjusted.
Exactly.
That's what it came down to, is the Shannon defense never adjusted for a running quarterback. And as a result, they had room to run every. Nickel defenses are not built to handle running quarterbacks. And so he gets outside the pocket. They would have a lot of real estate, and Desmond Ridder, more than anyone else, just had a field day.
Weather is going to be really warm in Louisville. It's going to be low 80s at kickoff, sunny, no rain in the forecast. Flipping over to the offensive side of the ball, Dylan Gabriel obviously has worked out quite a few of the kinks. That 44-yard touchdown run, by the way, that he had on a straight leaving the pocket scramble, wasn't a design run at all. Was one of the most impressive touchdown runs I think I've ever seen by a UCF player. I mean, because he ran pretty much about 120 yards.
Not only that, but Coach Malzahn told him to go out of bounds. Just go out of bounds.
Go out of bounds. What are you doing? I thought he was going to go out of bounds, but he found the lane down the sideline and he ran it in untouched.
And that's where your block, no block, no rock. Those downfield players, man, they never gave up on blocking, and that's what really sprung that run.
Yeah. And we saw some of his speed too, which I don't think people fully appreciate. But rushing production right now, and I find this interesting. UCF right now is 11th in the country in total rushing through the first two games. And yes, I know, all right, Bethune-Cookman, all right, but this is what we wanted to see, right? 573 yards a game right now, 7th in the country in total offense through two games, 15th in passing, 17th in running. But this is the run first team that Gus likes to run, that runs tempo, right? So how does that spin forward against Louisville's defense? Because I'm looking at their statistics right now for the Cardinals, and they've struggled against the run. They are giving up. They're 92nd in the country in total defense, giving up 402 yards a game. And that's, by the way, also having played an FCS opponent. And rushing defense, they're giving up 70. They're 71st. Passing yards allowed 102nd. So they're really struggling on defense right now. Are you licking your chops if you're DG right now?
Oh, absolutely. And while UCF suffers from the same thing, there's always a bit of trepidation when your leading tackler is a defensive back. That means
a little bit.
You're always
that's never a good sign.
No, and unfortunately, UCF has the same problem. Quadric Bullard leads the team in tackles with 16. Granted, the next five players are all linebackers or defensive linemen. But that's neither here nor there. Louisville Cardinals, Kendrick Duncan Jr. leads their tackles with 16 so far. A Georgia Southern transfer, still relatively new to the program. This is first year there, but you always have to be concerned on a defensive standpoint when your defensive backs are doing that much work and having to come up. This is a great opportunity to let the run set up the pass, which worked beautifully against Boise State. They actually didn't run nearly as much until garbage time against Bethune-Cookman. Isaiah Bowser only had 70 something yards for the game. It was not, blowed up. Even though he had 4 touchdowns, they didn't really have to overutilize him.
59 rushing yards.
59. Okay. Trillion Coles was the one in the 70s.
Yeah. Trillion had 78.
And he was the leading rusher. So, when you look at it, I think you're going to see a bit of running in the early downs, and then you're just going to see them start to go up top and just make those defensive backs work. 9
different guys recorded rushes for UCF against Bethune-Cookman. Eric, your side of it. If you're UCF's offense, this is a golden opportunity on the road. This is not the Louisville defense that we saw in 2013.
There's nothing like this from 20. There's nothing.
No, there isn't
like this.
No, there isn't. No, there isn't. Which is why it's very likely that, unlike, they will not reach the 2.2 million viewers that it did in 2013 in a Friday night game. I'll take the under in that. But I will say this. I'll caution this. This is the first time the UCF is on the road and will have a crowd to deal with in 2 years? Really?
Like 2019.
Yeah.
Right? Like who did they go on the road? I guess Georgia Tech had some fans, but that's what I mean. Fans, I'm talking like
full stadium, full allowed stadium.
Yeah, not like 10% capacity or 20%. So there is an adjustment there. Will they be affected by that? Not having noise against them offensively for the first time, and could that result in some penalties for a first road game, which sometimes we see with teams commit some penalties, false starts, things like that, because they're on the road. I think that's the one thing I will caution that. Secondly, Louisville, 34 minutes time of possession. It's kind of weird because they don't go slow, but what they do is they do a lot of dinking and dunking. So do they try to play keep away from UCF? Those are the 2 things I would worry about from that side of the ball.
If they're smart, yeah, because that's actually where UCF's at their worst, is the preventing of the dinking and dunking. And that's what kept Bethune-Cookman on the field. I do want to point out that that their prior game last week against Eastern Kentucky, they only had 40,000 fans there. So it's
right.
They're down from what they used to be throwing 60,000 on a regular basis. This is obviously a program that's been going through a lull.
There's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of negativity there because of Scott Satterfield interviewing at South Carolina. They had a bad year last year. You make a great point. I think the key here, if UCF can get off to a fast start, I think this crowd will turn on Louisville. They had a terrible showing against Ole Miss. If they get off to a bad start, I think Scott Satterfield could be in some hot water if they don't turn things around this year, because I don't know, people take offense to it if you interview for another job. Go figure it if it becomes public. So you make a couple of good points there, Drew. The crowd, while it will be bigger, as long as UCF gets to a good start, they could take it out of the game in more ways than one.
Well, as a fan, wouldn't you be upset if your head coach openly admitted that he interviewed for another job? That goes without saying. I remember when
no, apparently you can also get mad apparently if you wear a tie of a different color, but that's another story we want to get to.
Or just a shirt.
Maybe.
I was going to say
maybe a red, white checkered shirt.
I was going to say UCF's last true road game was November the 23rd at Tulane, 34-31 win in front of only 21,000 people. The one prior to that was the Tulsa loss, 34-31, in front of 16,331. Cardinal Stadium, by the way, in formerly known as Papa John's Stadium, but part of the Howard Schnellenberger football complex, interestingly enough. So yeah. By the way, one other thing I wanted to point out: the last of UCF's last 6 losses, 6 regular season losses, 4 of them have been on the road by a combined 8 points.
Oh yeah, outside of the BYU bowl game, which obviously
wasn't a true road game. It's a neutral
game. It's a neutral site game, but that's the only game in the Josh Heupel era that they lost by more than one score. Every game's been close, and even during the Scott Frost era, during 2017, there was a lot of 50-50 moments where you just needed a lucky bounce or whatnot. And, in 2019, that luck kind of ran out, and then it just kind of opened up in 2020. But how many games in the Josh Heupel era were one play away from being a win that ended up being a loss? There was a good number of them.
Well, the good news for Josh is you won't have to worry about that at Tennessee, because he'll lose by more than one score.
Well, yeah, he's going to be playing against. He has less talent to work with. He's going to be playing against.
Although he lost to Pitt again, by the way, we lost to Pitt by 7.
Bugaboo, man.
Yeah,
Pitt is Josh Heupel's.
Hey, they didn't have to do a Pitt special this time.
No, that's right. That's right.
So, like we said, it's a 7-point UCF line. Started at 7.5, by the way. Moved down a little bit.
Well, just remember, 3 points traditionally goes to the home team, so that's really more of kind of a 10-point expectation. In reality,
I think it might be closer than that. But I'm not surprised that UCF is the favorite. But
it started at 9 at some places. So depends how confident.
Cardinal Stadium's a tough place to play, even with less than a full house. It's not an easy stadium to play at. We remember 2013 when they were going absolutely bananas, but that was a top 10 team. But even during the downtime, it's still not an easy place. So, this will be a test.
All time, by the way, Louisville is 139 at home.
Yeah, but there's one. One of those 39 losses came against
2013.
How many? What do you think the over/under is on the Friday night telecast? They bring up the 13 game with the highlights there. Two. What do you think? Oh. Only once?
They'll probably just recap it coming out of a break.
Our boy Jason Benetti.
It's going to come up at least once. That's a guarantee.
It's going to come up once. The over/under is 1.5.
1.5.
I like it. 1.5.
I'm going to go with the over on that. I think 2 is a little bit of a low.
So you're saying more than one time they show a highlight from that game?
I think 2 is reasonable. I think there's enough. There's probably gonna be enough. Like, we need to fill space time that you can probably do that.
I think they'll probably show it like once coming out of a break, like last time UCF was here. And then I guess it also depends on how the game goes. To Jeff Godfrey and everything. The great Storm Johnson run, which is one of my favorite unsung UCF plays of all time, where he pulled the Dylan Gabriel and ran basically cut back across the entire field.
That was a one-play drive, if I remember.
Yeah, it was right after we scored, got the fumble on the kickoff, and then scored again, and that's what got us back into it. So.
Oh man, good memories.
One of the most significant wins in the history of the UCF football program. It propelled them to win the American Conference when it was eligible for the BCS and play in the Fiesta Bowl and beat Baylor against a talented Louisville team that has Teddy Bridgewater, Devontae Parker, among others. That was the
1 year of UCF's first year in the American, the 1 year when the American had a automatic BCS bowl bid. And you guys remember, Louisville was the prohibitive favorite.
Oh, hands down. Oh, yeah, because they had because the year before they had blown out Florida in the Sugar Bowl, so there was a lot of hype.
And Teddy B was the star, and Charlie Strong's stock was as high as it was, and they were people had basically penciled in Louisville to be the Big East represent, or the American Athletic Conference representative in the BCS, and then UCF came and spoiled the party.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Louisville was ranked 6th going into that game. And
they were in the top 10.
I think they were 6th. The The question is, which number 6 win becomes bigger? Was it the Louisville one or the Baylor one?
Oh, I mean, you could argue.
ESPN had them ranked 8th.
Yeah, I had them at 8 too, but top 10 is Nord. But here's the thing. I would say the Louisville game's bigger, and I know that's controversial because of the Baylor and the bowl game. People put too much stock on bowl games. If you don't beat Louisville, you don't get a chance to play Baylor. It's that simple. Because Louisville would have won the league. So to me, without Louisville, you don't have the Baylor opportunity. That's why I always maintain that the South Florida win in 17 is bigger than the Auburn game. Because without the South Florida win, you don't get a chance to play Auburn. So, and I just put more stock in regular season college football than bowl games. And you have to get there. And that Louisville game, again, not that we're going to delve in this. That team, there's an ESPN Plus series currently on the current UCF team. They should do a documentary on that era. People forget that season for UCF. It almost didn't happen. Like they almost weren't eligible. If you remember, UCF appealed NCAA violations against them. In 2012, they were supposed to serve a year of probation because of the scandal. What was it? It was the whole
wasn't
thing.
A probation. It was the year of it was a bowl ban.
Bowl ban, thank you. Bowl ban because of what happened with some illegal recruiting and stuff going on. And so UCF, they were supposed to skip the bowl ban in 2012, but UCF decided to appeal, which was a very controversial decision because people are like, what are you talking about? This is your last year in Conference USA. Take the bowl ban. The NCAA never win, you never win an appeal against the NCAA, very rarely. Why would you put this risk going into a year where you could play, in theory, in a BCS bowl game? But they appealed, and they won the appeal, so they were eligible in 2013. If they lose that appeal, oh, my goodness.
This would have been a catastrophic. This would have been Ohio State 2012.
Exactly.
You win it all, and you can't do anything. But
George O'Leary and
Auburn 93.
And you know what?
93.
And I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you this: if they lose that appeal, George O'Leary's legacy is completely different than it is now, because he would have taken a lot of blame for that, and I think it would have taken his legacy would have been a very negative. I mean, look, there's some negativity as it is with some fan base. I think it would have been a majority if that appeal gets lost. That's a huge decision that kind of people should not forget in UCF history.
Yeah.
Okay, I checked real quickly. Louisville was 8th in the AP poll. They were 6th in the coaches and the Harris poll in that game.
Oh, the Harris poll. Listen, if we would have beaten South Carolina, I think we win the Harris poll national title.
Well, the Harris poll was required to do.
I remember that
for the BCS. In fact,
I remember that. Charles Davis was like one of the voters in that. I do.
And they didn't have a final poll after January. Their last poll was the last BCS rankings. Yeah. So the coaches and the AP were the two, but you're right.
That was because remember the Associated Press had instructed the BCS that
to pound sand
our rankings anymore.
Yeah, go pound sand. We don't want to work with you anymore.
Yeah. Takes us to our next little segment of what's been going on in UCF land of late. And there are some reports off of Brandon Helwig's message board, UCFsports.com, that UCF may be undergoing a change in its apparel contract. Now, this is the final year that UCF is involved with Nike. That contract is up. And Brandon is reporting some of his sources are saying that a move to Adidas may be imminent. For UCF. Nothing has been officially announced or reported yet, but there's a lot of reaction on social media right now, and a large percentage of that reaction is quite negative toward the possibility of UCF moving back to Adidas, who they had as a apparel partner from, what was it, Drew, about 2005?
2004 through 2010.
Right, when George O'Leary got there through 2010. Of course, there was the Marcus Jordan Air Jordans flap, and Adidas basically dropped UCF at the time. Nike swooped in for the rescue. UCF has been a Nike school since, but there's a possibility now that they may go over to Adidas. Now, interesting to note, Arkansas State under Terry Mohajir was an Adidas school. Like I said, the reaction, we read a poll on Black Gold Banneret's Twitter account, And just curious about about what fans are really thinking. So there were 4 options in this poll. This was the question. Let's settle this. The options were Nike, Adidas, whoever pays more, and I don't care at all. Whoever pays more got 48.7% of the vote. Nike got 37.9%, Adidas 3.4%, I don't care 10%. Now, Drew, you are an equipment guru. You're a jersey guru.
I may have a couple here at the house.
Literally,
you have a few
100.
You know more about this than anyone else I know. All right. So what is the situation that we've been able to glean so far regarding Nike, what UCF gets from Nike right now, and then what would be the reason that UCF would switch?
Well, let's first turn back the clock. Let's go back to that whole 2009, 2010 Jordan shoe issue. And it's well documented that the regional reps that UCF worked with said, yes, he can wear those shoes and will still be good. And it was
because he's Michael Jordan's son.
He's Michael Jordan's son. And in the grand
seems like a very reasonable thing to accommodate.
It wasn't a big deal. Overseas in Germany, higher ups got very butthurt over it and basically said, you do this, we're dropping you. And they did. UCF was about to start, didn't even actually technically start it yet, was about to start a new $3 million apparel contract. And that dollar number is a little bit misleading. That's not necessarily cash. That's product. They're which I guess in the end,
$3 million worth of stuff.
Yeah. And it kind of ends up being similar in the fact that if you get a really expensive apparel deal, you don't have to pay out of pocket to buy stuff. And that's where the issues with Nike come into play. But, UCF had a pretty good deal, being a small school in Conference USA, not really, hadn't really made the jump yet, still hadn't had that first bowl win. They got that later, the next season. And we don't know if a redesign was in order under that new contract because it never actually got off the ground. It got dropped before it got started. So, 2010, UCF's desperate. They're calling everyone. And it's not Nike swooped in to the rescue. Well, let's make that very clear. No Michael Jordan intervention here. They flat out did not happen. This was a case. UCF reached out to Russell. UCF reached out to Under Armour. UCF reached out to Nike and ultimately went with Nike on a very low-end base deal. What it came down to is generally just discounts on apparel. I mean, there was really next to no money value to it. It was about as
Nike wasn't exactly shelling out dollars to UCF.
Oh, not at all. And they're still not. And that's where this problem is really coming up is they don't value UCF. UCF's still working on basically a lower tier, contract. And there's been no real urgency on Nike's part to really up the ante. Whereas, as we're hearing through the rumor mill, Adidas is kind of rolling out the red carpet for UCF. And I can understand why. There's 3 things working for it. One, it's a huge school. UCF, 72,000 students right now, over 300,000 living alumni. They're young. The average age is about 38 or so. I'm 38. I'm the average age.
We're average.
We are average people. We are unremarkable. But and they're seeing, and it's, they're seeing growth. They're seeing this as a long-term relationship. This would probably be like a 10, 12-year contract. So they're, Adidas is looking at this from a long-term grow with me standpoint. And
Big 12 too.
Yeah. And you're going to the Big 12. There's added value on top of that. I don't know if that's going to change Nike's perspective of UCF, but at least coming into this, they don't think much of UCF. They really don't. It's not coincidence that you can't find product. I mean, granted, no one else can find Nike product right now, but UCF
there's a lot of supply chain issues the world over because of COVID, and
right. But
and Nike's not alone in that. To be fair,
but this happened before COVID. There was supply chain problems between you go online, you're looking for something Nike related, it's sold out. That's not a 2020 exclusive thing. That's always been, somewhat of the case for anything, special other than the stock stuff. If you actually look at what UCF has in the bookstore, it's very generic. Their uniforms outside of the 2016 redesign, I'll get to that in a moment, are very generic. There's nothing really to them. There's nothing special. The only reason why UCF has special uniforms for football is Scott Frost called in a favor to Phil Knight, former CEO of Nike, and said, hey, help me out. And so they did that one redesign on a template that was current at the time, has since become outdated technology, and nothing has changed since. Why? Because that was a favor to Scott Frost, not a favor to UCF. So they extended the current contract 2 more years, hence why it's expiring next year and not last year, which I think actually is a blessing in disguise, because there's more money now than there was in 2020 when you're in the middle of COVID and everyone's freaking out and things are going horribly wrong. You're going into 2022, things are a lot more stable. You've got the season that's going okay. I think that'll actually benefit UCF more, especially now with the Big 12 announcement under their belt. But when you look at it from a whole standpoint, UCF has a lot to potentially gain from this. And don't get caught up in the dollar number. The big thing, because some schools do get some kickbacks and they get some bonuses based on things that they do. The big thing is the amount of equipment that they're given as part of it, not a discount to buy, but that they're given. And so that's about as good as money, because the school doesn't have to spend on it. I think one thing that we need to acknowledge, because a lot of UCF fans are recalling the old Adidas product, which the uniforms weren't great, but in the last 6 to 7 years, Adidas product has skyrocketed in technology. They haven't caught Nike. Nike is always going to be the front runner in uniform technology. But Adidas has made themselves respectable as far as the tech. A lot of people are not wild about the design, but if you're one of the elite schools, and that's one of the things that has been rumored that UCF would be classified as, you get the new stuff, the better stuff, and Adidas is going away from the kind of garish looking diamond that a lot of the old, lower level schools like USF are still getting, but that's starting to erode away. So I think we need to go in this with a little bit of an open mind, that this is a different company as far as quality of technology than the last time UCF did it. So I'm not saying one way or the other. As I said, I'm a Nike guy, but I want what's best for UCF. But I don't think we should automatically condemn Adidas for a past relationship that's over a decade old. Things have changed.
So what are the key things we're going to have to look for here? I imagine that everything is very hush hush on this, understandably so, because this is a big business deal.
Yeah,
this is much more hush hush than the Big 12, obviously. So
what weird. Weird. That is so weird and true at the same time.
I tell you, this is like what Dan Le Batard calls it, right? Eric, is cold business.
Yeah. Look at Louisville's deal. What was it? 12 years, 160 million. That's a lot of cheese. The Big 12 isn't saying, hey, you're getting 100 million by signing on with us. So there's different things at stake here, and I can understand the hush hushness, because UCF's value with the conference is a lot different than UCF's value with an apparel, manufacturer.
Hmm. Yeah.
By the way, it's worth mentioning, Brandon, we talked about, was on Mark Daniels' Beat of Sports on Wednesday. This topic came up. He says that there could be a deal with that, whatever the decision UCF does, whether it be with Nike, Adidas, whatever. He thinks it'll be done right by the calendar year, basically by the end of this calendar year, because
it needs to be.
Correct. That's what he said. Yeah. So that's kind of the timetable on that. So we'll see what happens. Look, I just want to let you guys know I have Adidas UCF gear and Nike gear in my closet. So I'm good either way.
I'd like to point out, when UCF had Adidas for their football uniforms, I bought a UCF Nike shirt at the bookstore. Just because they're the official apparel manufacturer and uniform manufacturer does not mean they're the exclusive. The UCF had Under Armour stuff. UCF had some generic brands. And just because they're the apparel designer does not mean that you're stuck having to buy Adidas. I know there's a lot of people who are brand loyal one way or the other. I've always been a Nike guy for shoes. I've been buying Nike since I was in grade school, and they just seem to work for me. But I'll tell you one thing, I'll be willing to buy, an Adidas jersey if need be, if it comes to that. But you're right, it has to be done soon, because if they change hands, you have to design stuff.
Correct.
That takes time.
Correct.
It takes collaboration.
One thing that I think Brandon did bring up and remind me too, Eric, because I listened to the same interview you did, was that, people always, one of the many things people are, concerned about is what happens with the space game uniforms. Those were designed by UCF. Correct. In-house. Mm-hmm. Those weren't designed by Nike.
And UCF can request that with anybody, Adidas, Nike, etc. So just because if they don't end up staying with Nike, does not mean that those jerseys necessarily go away.
Not only that, but they can have it made by a third party and just slap Adidas on there. They can do that.
Interesting.
There's
now. What about the regular uniforms though? Did Nike actually design those in-house, or to what extent did UCF collaborate with them? What do we know about that?
It was a collaboration. I remember when they first came out with the 2016 series. The Pegasus series is probably the best way to call it, because you have the Pegasus series, you have the Nitro series. The Pegasus series, they actually had a little web page built on it with the video and stuff, and it was a dual collaboration. You had Nike designers come to UCF and talk about, learn about the school and things. That's why the Pegasus played a role in it. And, they went back and forth. But
still got the Pegasus on the sleeve too, which I love. I just love that.
I love it and I hate it. And I love that it's there. I hate that it's not pronounced enough. It's meant to be very subtle.
I like that it's subtle.
I like it when it's more pronounced on the white and the pewter jerseys. On the black and anthracite, it kind of disappears. It doesn't translate well to television. All you can see is a little shine of something, but you really don't see the Pegasus. It shows up more on consumer product because, one, it's bigger, and two, it's actually made differently than on the official jerseys. But I would love to see, like on a white jersey and a white away jersey, have a black Pegasus, on the sleeve. Make it part of the product, not just a little end piece, but make it a substantial part of the product. Because it is UCF, and before 2016, the rest of the world didn't know that. So I think we should take it up a notch.
Well, again, we're gonna have to monitor this as it goes by.
Drew's got it down pat, man. Huh?
Maybe we should get Drew to collaborate with whoever it is.
Seriously, absolutely.
Adidas, have him involved in it, because nobody knows more about this than Drew.
He literally has this gear in his closet.
Reach out to Statboy Drew on Twitter for all your latest on Drip U.
I may have late night the other night kind of gone on a tangent with some of the old Adidas and older Nike into newer Nike, talking about the evolution and stuff.
I dare you all find anybody else.
Has a video blog written all over it right there, Drew. I'm telling you right now. Okay,
I got to pick up the office a little bit more. I started making progress, and then life happened, and it's got to be a little cleaner before I do a full video blog on it. You guys have seen. You got a phone, guys seen the office.
Well, you better get to work on that, because this could be a night shift special here in a few months.
Happen quick, yes. So
I'm just
down.
for the hell of it. I threw on both of the current Nike jerseys today just to see how they fit, because I was talking about different materials, and I got to say the Nitro ones, man, they run small. That's a double XL, and I normally wear single XL, and it was. If I wore that with pads, I'd be wearing a double XL.
That's a great way to end the segment right there.
Perfect. All right, coming up next. When we return, a little bit more Big 12 talk, Eric. We're going to talk about the move to the Big 12.
Yeah,
in all sports.
That's
what
right.
is it really going to affect? And Drew will be in on this too. And this should be an interesting little discussion about what's going to happen with not just football, outside of football, for all UCF sports. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
We're back. It's Jeff and Eric and Drew with you here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. And of course, last Friday, it was made official, which we already have spoken about here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, but UCF will become a member of the Big 12 Conference. How about that reveal, by the way? Is Terry Mohajir just the best in press conferences?
I love this guy. I mean,
he's the
type of guy you just want to go hang out with.
Yeah.
He's just a regular guy. He doesn't come off as overly corporate. Now he probably is when he needs to be, but I mean, even at the Board of Trustees meeting, when he's unveiling the athletic vision plan that they have in place, even then he's got this ability to just make you want to run through a brick wall. He did it then.
Former football coach.
You're right. He was a former football coach, player. And I mean, he's a great motivator. And I mean, just look at him on the sidelines. You know, he's not afraid to throw a giant fist pump on national TV.
or five.
That nearly took his arm socket off.
One of the things is obviously that we have analyzed from here until the cows come home about how this really affects UCF football, obviously. And of course, we all agree that UCF should be a contender in the Big 12 almost immediately in football when they join. No later than July 1st, 2024, which of course is a very couched way of saying, we're kind of working on it here. But Eric, you and I went through analyzing UCF's moves in the Olympic sports, and I thought you did a really good job breaking it down on blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can read it. Comparing the RPI rankings of conferences across all the sports in UCF that we could possibly find. So what were some of the interesting observations that you made about which sports are going to benefit the most?
Well, I think it depends on your perspective, but let's kind of start with so much talk of the football. But to me, it cannot be emphasized enough. UCF men's basketball is entering arguably the number one conference in college basketball, even with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Now, our friend that used to be on this show that had good wardrobe, hats and stuff. I used to argue with him last year about the Big 10 versus the Big 12. I'm a Big 12 guy. In fact, the Big 12 schedule came out ironically on Wednesday because they have a huge TV slots with big Mondays and things like that. It's a big deal. This league is stacked. You got a premier, blue chipper, blue blood in Kansas leading the way in this league. But this is a league that goes 6, 7 deep. You could finish
defending national champions, Baylor.
Baylor just won the national title. It's a great point. Oklahoma State has great history. They just had the number one draft pick in Cunningham going to the Pistons. Henry Iba. They have tremendous history in basketball there. Texas Tech obviously just played for the national title a couple of years ago as a program. Iowa State. Everybody is good here. And I think
let's not forget Houston, who's joining with us.
Yep. Houston
Final Four.
So they're going to
Calvin Simpson, traditionally very good program out west. Cincinnati, we know how good that they've been over the years.
That's correct. So this league is still going to be stacked. I think you look in the future right now, the Big 12 is right with the Big 10 and the ACC. Those are your top 3 basketball leagues. And the big difference is, as much as I like the American, in the Big 12, there are no East Carolinas. There's no teams in that bottom that just kill your net rankings. The Big 12 is strong, which means from a casual fan standpoint, box office, baby. Like, UCF will make money on this because you could double the prices of season tickets and be worth it because you're going to get great college basketball. Beyond the court, where we're going to take our lubs, boys. We're going to take our lubs a little bit. Be patient.
UCF is the ECU now.
Be patient. I think if you're UCF, what you got to hope for is that you look at the blueprint of Jamie Dixon at TCU, not a traditional basketball school. They're a football school, but he's won enough there to make postseason from time to time. He's made the NCAA. We all remember the NIT that they beat us in 2017. They won the NIT title. To me, that's the blueprint for UCF. And the good news is you're in a league where if you finish 6th or 7th with a good non-conference, with a good resume, you can get into the tournament. In the American, you can never get in as a 6th or 7th place team, ever.
Women's basketball, I'm interested in the gaps between the American and the Big 12 and the various different sports. This is a big gap in women's hoops because you're going from the 9th RPI conference in 2021 to the number 3 conference. So this is a big jump for Coach Abe and company, isn't it?
It really is. Now, the Big 12 will get hurt by losing Texas there. They will get hurt a little bit there. And even Oklahoma. Oklahoma has had a good women's basketball program there. So that's probably dipped slightly a little bit. Still, you've got Baylor there. Although Baylor now, it's going to be interesting because their head coach, Kim Mulkey, just left to go to LSU. So will Baylor maintain its national title contender status under the new regime there? That remains to be seen. But you're right. It's still a strong league. Iowa State's good. Oklahoma State's good. West Virginia's good. I think UCF can compete much quicker, though, in the women's side than the men's side. And the reason I say that is the bottom of the Big 12 ain't so great either. They're better than the American, but I think the UCF with Coach Abe can compete at that level. Will they compete with a Baylor at the top? Probably not, but I do think they could be a top middle half team right away. The biggest issue, though, is size. And that's going to be a theme as we get into this, size. Because as you get into these bigger conferences, the big difference is teams like Baylor have tremendous size. We think UCF has size. Wait till you see the big teams like Baylor have size. But I do think UCF, with the recruiting and they're going to get, could probably compete. And I do think this, Jeff. I think this move kind of gets us a chance to exhale a little bit about whether Abe stays here long-term or not, right? Because that was the big question, whether she stay long-term. I think this move keeps her here for a while, I think. And that's going to be interesting.
Some of the sports I think are pretty interesting, Eric, that are not making quite as much of a jump aside. I think that it really being in the American really has been a help to UCF because the American has improved significantly over time in baseball, in softball, and in volleyball. And as a result, when we talk about those RPI rankings, the jump isn't quite as much for baseball, softball, and volleyball. For baseball, Big 12 is a number 2 conference. American's number 5. All right.
Baseball is like Super League as well. And now they do, again, lose Texas. That hurts in baseball. Mm-hmm. But
that brings them back toward where UCF is coming from.
Correct. But you still have TCU in the program. You got Texas Tech. They both have been World Series programs. Oklahoma State has great tradition. West Virginia, believe it or not, is very good in baseball. Baylor's very good. This is a Super League. Here's the advantage, and I'm going to add softball to this because, yes, softball loses a powerhouse in Oklahoma and Texas. However, with these additions, and keep in mind, baseball has Houston, which is good tradition in baseball as well. The thing that helps about these leagues is there's not no, with all due respect, there's no Memphis in the Big 12 as it comes to baseball and softball. Memphis has been a bottom team. So if you're a UCF in baseball or softball, for example, you could finish 3rd or 4th in this league and not only make the NCAA tournament, but be in the contention to host, which has been a huge problem for both programs to be in that position to host, whether it be facility issues or just, map. I think, and this is something that's here. Well, UCF's kind of been gypped, especially in softball, because Florida and Florida State always host in softball. UCF because FSU, Miami, and Florida host. By moving to the Big 12 and that added resume, I think baseball and softball, with the renovations that I would expect, guys, to happen here in the next handful of years, because this is a must. That's the caveat here. Baseball and softball must, and baseball's kind of started that, but they both need facility upgrades. If they do that, not only they could be in the mix in the Big 12 for contend, but they could be legit host contenders if they're a postseason team.
Yeah. Same thing with volleyball too, because obviously Texas is number 1. They're the strongest team in the country right now. But every year they compete. Again, it comes back to the Big 12 losing them. But, you still have some remaining strength with Kansas and Kansas State, Baylor and Iowa State, who've been perennially making the NCAA tournament. Again, this is a situation where you don't have to finish in the top 1 or 2 to make the NCAA in volleyball. You could finish 4th and make it. And I think that's a tremendous advantage. And I think it's going to be really helpful getting BYU in there, who's been very strong in volleyball over the year.
It's been a national seed at times.
And we've seen the resurgence of Cincinnati. Still remains to be seen about what happens after Jordan Thompson. But Molly Alvey can coach. So I think that's one thing that we're really interested in. The discussion gets really interesting around soccer. Women's soccer, big boost for UCF going from the number 9 to the number 4 conference, at least as of right now. But we have something interesting to talk about with men's soccer, Eric Lopez, because the Big 12 does not have men's soccer.
That's kind of an issue. We need a home, people.
Well, I asked Terry Mahajer during the press conference, what's the plan for men's soccer right now? Because, he's been rightfully very vocal about his support of soccer at UCF and believes and has told the board of trustees that he believes that UCF, he believes in the concept of the football campus as well, where, UCF can contend for national championships year in and year out in women's and men's soccer. Well, on the women's side, obviously we talked about that's no problem. Obviously now you have the main contenders are West Virginia and TCU, who are pretty good. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, also very good. But in the men's side, there's only one school that's actually in the Big 12 that sponsors men's soccer. That's West Virginia. They just moved to Conference USA from the MAC. Now, all of Florida's Division I men's soccer programs are either in the American, Conference USA, or the A-Sun. Okay? Not going to the A-Sun. All right, good. The deal is basically UCF men's soccer is going to have to find a home in some other league as an associate member. And Terry Mahajer talked about that. He said basically his idea was once the I's are dotted and T's are crossed with the larger Big 12 deal, because they still have to actually negotiate the terms. All right. Then the process is going to begin for UCF to find a home for men's soccer. So where do you go? Well, you got a couple options. You can stay in the American, which is a pretty good soccer league. Only has 6 schools in it, but has been strong, particularly recently especially with SMU. Tulsa's getting a little bit better as well. And we'll see if they can sustain that. Or you could go back to an old friend, Conference USA. FAU and FIU are currently there now. No word on whether or not they might move to the American, but of course, that's one of those things that ends up being a possibility. I don't know, Eric. What do you think that would happen here? Remember, the American was 4th in the nation in conference RPI in last season, and that was with having lost 2 teams, UConn and Cincinnati.
You're right. The problem to it's too murky to kind of forecast this, because we don't know who's coming to the American for all sports here in the next couple of years. The American is going to have a counter here to losing UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati. So who do they bring in? Do those teams that bring in have men's soccer? Do they not? So I think you're right. I think UCF men's soccer is going to end up either in the American or Conference USA. They're 2 top 6 leagues in men's soccer. Mm-hmm. The question is, which spot is willing to give them that invite? Did the American try to keep them and in return try to move over, or do they add so many teams that UCF finds a spot in Conference USA that's left by somebody that went to the American for other sports? That's
mind you, by the way, Kentucky and South Carolina have men's soccer. There is no SEC men's soccer either. Correct. They play in Conference USA, and Conference USA has the defending national champions in Marshall too.
Correct. So I think it's confusing, which is not great when recruiting standpoint. However, those 2 options I think will be there for UCF. I think they'll still be in a top 6 men's soccer league. What's fascinating about it is the TV rights could be fascinating on this regard, because if you want to watch UCF men's soccer, what if they're let's say they're in Conference USA? Well, Conference USA doesn't have an ESPN deal. So what does that mean? Where can I watch UCF soccer? This is some of the stuff that the SEC schools have had to deal with. Kentucky, you mentioned, and South Carolina, others. So some murky questions. It's going to take a little while. We're going to have to be a little patient. to kind of let the dust settle. Once we know what the American is going to do as far as expanding with which schools they expand with, I think we'll have a much clearer idea where UCF men's soccer will end up.
Well, I'd like to point out real quick that Terry Mohajir did say he preferred to stay in the American.
Of course.
Which was his initial answer to Jeff's question, as well as the fact of, as you said yourself, UCF still negotiating. The American's going to move pretty quick because they too have to have that window for negotiating as well as exit period from whatever conference these other schools are coming from. It may happen pretty quick, and it's probably going to be not really a big deal to find a new home from a time standpoint, because they're probably going to know what the landscape's going to look like sooner rather than later.
I agree.
The American is a lot more attractive, aside from the strength of the conference, from a media standpoint, the accessibility. We've seen it. We're living it. Men's soccer is very accessible through ESPN Plus. That deal
for that program too. It really has been.
And despite what people have said about the media deal, the American media deal from an exposure standpoint is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Ask every school in Conference USA in the Mountain West outside of Boise right now if they would take it. And they would say yes, they would take it.
It's an absolute wasteland when it comes to their exposure. I mean, ESPN Tier 3 coverage is so valuable. I think that's got to be a major sticking point for UCF to push to stay in the American, aside from the fact that right now there's only 6 programs.
It's a major sticking point. I think it's still also a big point to follow in this new Big 12 TV contract when that comes up. I do think this too, real quick. I don't get a sense, and I could be proven wrong on this. I think Mike Oresco and Terry Mohajir have a good relationship. I even though they may, I don't sense animosity like I did with UConn. When UConn was complaining and, what about SNY and our basketball and cry? And we're like such a snobby school. We could be an independent in football here at Yorkie Way. Anyway, I think there's a good relationship here. And it wouldn't surprise me, guys, right? In part of the negotiations for, like, let's say UCF to get to the Big 12 in 2023, part of the negotiations is, hey, we keep men's soccer here. Right? I mean, that's probably going to be – we're probably going to know once they reach that deal one way or the other.
Well, I mean, UConn's – even their president was so brazen in the fact that they really didn't want to be in the American. I mean, none of the other schools that have left, the other 4, have said
that UConn basketball has really lit it up since joining the Big East. Nice job. Clowns.
Well, I mean, the Big East Conference has been kind of soft and they've kind of waltzed right through it. But that's neither here nor there.
That football powerhouse, though, man.
Man, FCS schools laugh at them.
But it was, remember, guys, it was the Americans' fault that UConn couldn't recruit him.
Exactly.
Just ask Syracuse how that Northeast has worked out for.
Whoa! Wow!
I can tell you exactly how.
Why are you going after Jeffrey there? Don't go in.
It's true though. It's
hashtag facts.
I mean,
I will say that
on him.
That's true.
It's a truth statement. It's a true statement. But the other thing is, the other 4, I think, have acted with a lot more grace and professionalism. Yeah, the American and Mike Oresco are disappointed because they're losing a lot. But there doesn't seem to be any, open animosity between the schools, and I think that'll help.
You be playing nice.
Well, you play by you,
except for maybe Cincinnati with that flag that.
Well, I think that might have started to set the rope on that bridge.
Big huge yikes on that.
You can put it on the board and say, we're excited, but I mean, ooh, that was.
Yeah.
I want to make a real quick point. I think women's soccer has the best chance to be the first to win a Big 12 title of all the programs.
Very strong.
Well, because they're strong, and even though the Big 12, I think, is like the Big 12's top is not necessarily that much better than a Memphis or South Florida. Where they're better is at the bottom, obviously. Their bottom teams are better than the bottom teams of the American. But the point is UCF is used to competing with teams that are similar at the top of the Big 12. So I think they will have a quicker chance in the first couple of years to challenge for a conference championship of the sports that we have brought up.
And inversely, men's basketball, I think, has the most work by a mile to have to.
But I want to. That does not mean Johnny Dawkins is safe. He's fine. Don't start with that nonsense.
That's a strong
rightfully,
league.
I think
to do. But I believe he's gotten ahead on that work with the recruiting.
And he has experience coaching at a Power 5 league. He's coaching a P5 league. His contract's through 2025, as is Coach Abe, by the way. So,
real quick, UCF rowing will be in a conference with Alabama.
Yeah! Finally!
Tennis, Eric. John Roddick makes his return, where he was the head coach at Oklahoma for 7 seasons. Of course, he won't be playing against Oklahoma, but knows his way around the Big 12 quite well. Women's tennis is pretty solid with Baylor, Texas Tech, and Oklahoma State all made the NCAA tournament. Golf, Big 12, usually very strong. Oklahoma State in particular on both sides. And then, of course, track and field, cross country. This is one where I think it's going to get really interesting because their biggest boost in track and field is going to come from Houston joining the conference.
No doubt.
Because Roy Burrell, that's a machine that he has over there at Houston.
But I agree.
Got them competing against Iowa State and Oklahoma State. Really good cross country programs also in the Big 12. So that should be.
Well, Dana Boone was an associate coach at Texas Tech, so she knows the Big 12 well, and that's some of the interesting storylines there.
So riddle me this, Batman. With the increase in expected revenue and the increase in competition, do you see UCF starting to look into adding a sport like a men's track and field, perhaps?
I know that's always been something that fans have always been talking about have brought up time and time again. I mean, speaking as a fan, I think that would be a blast to see personally. There's still a lot of, I still think that there's going to be ripple effects post-COVID that UCF is going to have to deal with. It would be cool.
One of the things about UCF setup is they currently have the lowest number of men's sports allowed in Division One. So, I mean, there's definitely potential to grow, but obviously there's a laundry list of stuff. UCF has a lot of debt that has to be paid off. There's a lot of ambitious facility plans.
Yeah.
There's a lot. So, I mean, this wouldn't be a tomorrow decision, but I mean, this would definitely be probably near term down the road discussion once things have kind of stabilized.
Yeah.
Because obviously you don't know what the media deal is going to be. You don't know what the incoming revenue is going to be. Granted, it's going to be a major shot in the arm compared to what UCF is currently getting. But there's still a lot of variables, as you said, but there's an appetite. There's been recruits, football recruits that have wanted to be able to run track in the spring, a lot of speedsters, but they can't. So some of them go elsewhere as a result. That's had probably a material effect. You want to be able to have that opportunity. The facilities are already there. It becomes a regulatory thing. Make sure that your scholarship numbers work out with Title IX. And if you have to add a women's sport, well, there's more expense there to be able to do it. It's going to run you probably a few $100,000 a year to run the sport. Travel costs, personnel.
Man, Drew's on fire. Drew's on fire tonight. He wants to get involved in the jerseys and adding team sports. I mean, good Lord.
What does he need us for? Jeez.
Exactly. Two quick things on this. John Roddick could potentially win a Big 12 championship with two different programs for the same league, Oklahoma and UCF. You got to be quirky. I think tennis can win the Big 12 right away, both men and women right away. And if you talk about adding sports, hey, how about wrestling? That's pretty big in the Big 12. And we just had a UCF alum a half a second away from winning the NXT title this week.
I mean, I happen to be a high school wrestler who was a letterman. I mean, I would love to see wrestling back in Florida. There's only one university in the state of Florida that has NCAA wrestling, and I bet you can't guess who it is.
Say that again.
Oh, wow. One in the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Who we got? I don't know. You got me on this.
Really? Jeff, do you have a guess?
I got nothing, man.
It's Florida. It's Florida Memorial.
Well,
See,
no
I
wonder
whenever
I didn't get it.
I only follow WWE and AEW and NXT. That's all wrestling. Although, shout out Johnny Rouse, UCF Hall of Famer, when UCF used to have wrestling back in the early 70s.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Bryson Turner is going to join us, update us on the Olympic sports that are going on right now.
We love you, Cal Bloom.
Yes. Shout out to Cal Bloom popping up on
and your new name.
Going for a title too. Anyway, we'll hit up some of that stuff and we'll talk with Bryson about what went on over the weekend after this. Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Drew, and Eric with you. Joining us now, Bryson Turner, who's been keeping an eye on the Olympic sports for UCF, as he always does. Make sure you read his nightcap, which comes out every Monday, recapping the weekend that was in UCF sports. Bryson, how are you? Welcome back. Good to see you.
How you doing, gentlemen?
We let's start with women's soccer because they had a good weekend, but not as good as it could have been. First of all, went up to Oxford and just put the smackdown on Ole Miss, 3-0. Came back home. They were scheduled to play number 2 North Carolina on Sunday, but the game got underway. Carolina took the lead, but the game was declared a no contest because, once again, weather reared its ugly head. What happened?
Yeah, it was basically the team's biggest game of the season. Tiffany Roberts-Sahaydak going up against her alma mater, going for win number 2 against number 2. I put out that whole tweet hyping it all up. And then Mother Nature decides, you know what? Let's not do this. So in the end, me and Eric talked about this. I think that we don't know if this could impact how UCF's rank is perceived. They did go up 3 spots, but who knows if it could have been more if the North Carolina game got played and perhaps we won it. But with the way the game started, it was not looking like good in the team's favor in the beginning with the goal and about 13 goals very shortly after the game began. And it was quite the goal, let me tell you. It was Abby Allen, if I recall correctly, and it was she basically nailed it right from the pass to the goal. And I was like, that's a goal a number 2 team in the country makes. And so I think in the end, we're not really sure how it would have played out, but Mother Nature is what it is, and we just kind of have to roll with it here in Florida. So we'll see what happens. We have the Ole Miss game, and we moved up in the rankings anyway. So you just can control what you can't control.
And conference play starts this Thursday with Houston already.
Yes,
at Houston. So right now they're 4-2 women's soccer as they begin conference. They have one more non-conference game Sunday against Stetson, and that's at home. So that's their next home game as well. What do you think, Eric? They were down. Let's say that score held up. Do they catch a break in the RPI by not having a loss in there?
It's kind of counterproductive. North Carolina would have added to the strength of schedule, but to your point, you wouldn't have had a loss. Carolina smoked, by the way, like Florida 7-0. To give you a comparison, how good they are. They're a national title. So many people believe they're a national title favorite. But look, the good news for women's soccer is they have a win against Penn State. Ole Miss is a good win. The belief is that the schedule strength is strong enough as it is. So I think actually they'll be okay from that standpoint. You would have liked to have gotten a result against Carolina. That could have made a big difference there. But the good news is Chris Henderson, who covers women's soccer in depth, pretty much he covers women's soccer like I covered softball, in and inside out. He has in his RPI mock, because he knows the formula for the RPI in women's soccer, UCF's actually in the top 12 in the RPI, according to Chris Henderson. So they're in good shape up until this point. It's about taking care of business in conference play, and it starts with Houston.
All right. Men's soccer, on the other hand, they had another offensive explosion over the week. 6 goals against Florida Gulf Coast. Now, granted, FGCU is 0-3-1, but Alessandro Campoy was the star. 4 goals that didn't set a new school record. In fact, I don't think it even tied one, right? Hecky Riffinen had a couple 5-goal games for UCF. But That's still some history out there, Bryson, and it is exactly what UCF needed because, right now they're 2-3, having, after coming off the 2 straight losses to Virginia Tech and NC State, as they head into conference play now with Memphis, heading to Memphis on Saturday. So quick recap of that Florida Gulf Coast game, because, that was an offensive onslaught, like you said in the in your piece.
Yes, it was. We Compoy just got it right out of the way early in the 4th minute. He would score again in the 26th minute, and he got the hat trick in the first half.
Yeah,
I mean, I have never seen that play out, and I was just thinking like, well, okay then. And then he just comes back out in the second half, and he ends up scoring again in the 60th minute. Also very understated because of Compoy's historic match. But Luca Dorado scored 2 goals in this match too. So
interestingly enough, sorry to interrupt, Dorado coming into that game had 3 goals. He now has 5 on the year. Compoy had none. He now has 4. He's second on the team.
Oh yes, this team has done quite well offensively. Let me tell you that. And you mentioned Heikki Rippinen. And I will say this, even though Compoy did not break any records, this type of offensive performance in a single match by one player has not been seen since 1998. And kind of an interesting stat, Heikki Rippinen is the only UCF player in history to score exactly 4 goals in a single match. He did it twice. So Compoy becomes the second player to do that, and even then, he joins the pantheon of Heikki Rippinen, and what was it, Roy Francois,
Ronnie Francois, UCF Hall of Famer.
Yeah, yes, Cal Jennings also. Cal never had a 4-goal game, right?
No, he had a bunch of hat tricks. He just chilled with a bunch of hat tricks and he took easy.
So, Randy DeShields was the third one.
All right, Bryson, volleyball. Good weekend this past weekend. They went 2-1, beat Florida Gulf Coast in 4. Thrilling match on Friday that I got to call against Florida State that went 5. And we thought it was historic at that point with McKenna Melville, who had 27 kills, which tied a career high, and set a new career high with 28 digs. And a big win for UCF, no doubt. But then the next day they come up against Georgia. Now UCF loses the match in 5, and it went beyond 15. It went to overtime, basically 16-14 in the 5th. But again, McKenna was the star. She set a new career high in that one with 30 kills, including 3 aces to go along with it. But still, UCF just couldn't quite get over the hump in that 5th set. They were right there with them. Still, I think even though their record right now stands at 3-5, I think they got to be really happy with where this is looking right now. What did you see this weekend from the team as they get ready for a little road tournament, staying in the Sunshine State before conference play?
I think that the rest of the team it needs to be able to aid McKenna Melville. I think really the key to this game, or the key to this tournament, the key to the team's whole season, is that they need to be able to come to McKenna Melville's aid, because I pretty much in every loss in this team I've seen is that McKenna Melville absolutely dominates and the rest of the team isn't able to keep up. If you look at the Georgia game, for example, McKenna Melville has 30 kills, and then the next player the player with the second most kills during that game, Mackenzie Chambers, with 9. I mean, McKenna Melville, absolutely amazing athlete. There was a reason why she was one of the Knights of the Week this week. Setting career highs in over the span of just under 24 hours. Absolutely amazing. But the rest of this team needs to be able to aid her, because otherwise, I don't know how, because McKenna Melville can't do it all herself.
Well, I mean, we saw some of that in the Florida State match, right? I mean, Anne-Marie Watson had 11 kills. Tally Marmot had 14. I thought the real star of that match was Catherine Westlich, who had 7 kills on 13 swings and no errors. And if that's a .538 hitting percentage, which is astronomical, she was, she was able to pick her spots really nicely. And that's what I thought was the real key there. You're right. That is an ongoing key for UCF is how do we, keep McKenna's right arm from falling off by the middle of conference play. But, but again, sometimes you just gotta let McKenna cook, especially when you're playing a big opponent like Georgia. And I think we'll probably see them sort of work on some more things to diversify the game as we get to non-conference play. Of course, they have the upcoming tournament. Miami on Thursday, 10 a.m. This is down at FAU Arena. So you Knight fans down in Boca might want to check this out. And then 5 p.m. Thursday against Florida Gulf Coast before they take on FAU at 11 a.m. And then a week off before they're back home for the home opener on the 24th, the conference home opener, I should say, against ECU. So
a rematch of Florida Gulf Coast. Nice. Handed them
two of them against
their first law.
Which we've seen enough of them. I mean, good Lord. I can't even, they punch above their weight class so well. That's why they're incredible. They're so well coached. And plus they have all these players who we thought would be gone from them, like Courtney Van Loo and all them. They all came back as graduate students this year. Like, what is that?
Jeff's having bad memories right now.
I really am.
We better move on. I don't. You're gonna lose.
They were supposed to graduate like 2 years ago, and now here they all are back.
Darn it! They're a good program, Jeff. They rebuild. They reload. How dare they?
They're not rebuilding. They're not reloading. They keep bringing back the same players.
The extra COVID year is a blessing and a curse, my friend.
It works.
Anyway. So keep an eye out for those 3 matches. I think there's a very good chance UCF could come out of that weekend 3-0. By the way,
the goal is you want to have momentum going into conference play. That's the key here. You want to have momentum here going into conference play. You're going to defend your title. You're going to be a target once conference starts because everybody's going to be you're going to be the bullseye because you're the defending champion. So they got to
multi times over. I might add.
Exactly. Miami right now 7-0. They beat USF in Tampa twice. But other than that, they swept Alabama. They've only lost 1 set all year, and that was to USF in Tampa. So, but I think they're getting a much different test with UCF this time around. So that'll be 10 a.m. on Thursday.
Even one team that first lost.
Yeah, I know. Cross country. Bryson, you were really excited about this, and I can't blame you. On the during the Mountain Dew Invitational at Gainesville, we have a new star in cross country, don't we?
Yes, we do. And guess what? She is a freshman. Well, technically a registered freshman eligibility-wise, and that is Valerie Lastra. She already holds records for the fastest 5K and 6K run by a freshman, and now she can add to her belt the fastest 4K run in school history, a record that has stood since 1998. There's that year again. And I was just amazed to see that a record that has stood for so long. I mean, when you look at the cross country record book, it was in my tweet that when I first reported this, all of them are from the 21st century, pretty much from the 21st century. So Ann Panaggio's record has held for this long, and now Valerie Lastra has come in and broken it. Team-wise, the UCF team in general finished second in the Mountain Dew Invitational, their second runner-up finish of the season, and now they are ranked number 13 in the South region, which is according to UCF Athletics, it's the first time they've been ranked since 2016.
Not too bad. She was the American. By the way, Valerie was the American Freshman of the Year in 2020, 2021. And I mean, we saw how good that she could be, but now she's starting to smash overall records. And I think that's fun to see. And hey, we might see some real noise from cross country here in the fall. From Mater Academy in Miami, nonetheless. Eric, another Miami kid.
Can't go wrong with down there. And look,
go wrong.
Coach Brian Jackson, salute to him. He runs cross country. Dana Boone lets him run the cross country. He's in charge of the long distance, and it's paying off. Off to a great start here for this program. And remember, the conference championship will be in Lakeland in late October.
Huge thanks to Bryson. It's Bryson Turner on Twitter. Make sure you follow or you hit us up on Mondays for our night cap, where we donate, where we give some time to the best UCF performances from over the weekend in the Olympic sports, and pass out the night of the week, of which we had 3: Valerie Lastra, as well as
Alessandro Campoy,
and McKenna Melville. So, Bryson, thank you. By the way, before we go, Eric Lopez, big props to you.
Yeah.
Cal Bloom, your boy.
That's right.
They've got a gimmick for him, it looks like.
New name. He's now Von Wagner. Von Wagner.
Now we know Cal, former UCF tight end. And Drew is laughing hysterically. Now Cal,
we're a wrestling school now, Drew.
Cal has.
I used to watch wrestling when I was younger.
a family history in wrestling.
Yes.
Right. So this is no surprise. Really, it isn't at all. So how did he perform in the match in NXT?
Well, this is significant. It's kind of a surprise. NXT has kind of redone their show. It's back to being more developmental. There's been a lot of news recently. They like to go more younger, bigger guys, and stuff like that. So they did a new show, and Cal debuted. He's been on the show, but more like a security guy and things like that. And if you've read Black and Gold Banneret over the past, he made even a TV debut a year ago during the pandemic in SmackDown when he got beat up by Sheamus in a match. But now he shows
bumps, man. That was quite brutal.
But he shows up in this show because one of the guys in the main event of the title match, Kyle O'Reilly, gets jumped from behind by 2 guys backstage. Who comes to the aid and rescue? Von Wagner. So as a result, the commissioner, William Regal, inserts him into the title match. Now, our old co-host right now is laughing and just pulling his hair over the name Von Wagner, and I agree. But nonetheless, so he gets into the title match, and he comes within a half second of winning the NXT title. Like, if he would have won that, we would have had an emergency night shift, I think, and just breaking it down.
I don't doubt it.
He loses the match. Tommaso Ciampa wins the title, but he doesn't get pinned. So what that means, though, and in all seriousness, in the big picture, is he's going to be a player now in part of the NXT brand here. That they clearly have big plans. It's been reported Vince McMahon has been a big fan of his. He was a fan of his dad.
Yep.
And
his dad, Wayne Bloom, who, if you're an old time wrestling fan, was active from 88 to about 99.
Correct.
Was in the WWF from 91 to 93, WCW 1990, and went under. He was briefly known as Bo Beverly, if that name rings a bell, and the sports agent. And now he's passed the torch onto Cal/Von Wagner.
And he's been one of their top. Von Wagner. He's now Von Wagner. He's one of the bigger prospects, and he's kind of been forgotten a little bit from a UCF standpoint because all the attention has been on Parker Boudreaux, or as he now is known as, Harlan. That's his new name he has debuted. So
not Kevin Harlan.
No, just Harlan, because they like one names. So that tells me that he's probably close to debuting on NXT. Usually when you get a character name, you're pretty close to debuting. So, but hey, man, it's good for him. That's a big step. Gets into a title match. There's controversy whether that was a good, that it was a good idea, bad idea, who knows? But that tells you he's going to be a part of this brand new NXT direction that they're headed over there. And hopefully it works out for him. So I think we could have 2 major UCF alums as major players in professional wrestling here for the next few years.
Hey, congrats to Cal/Von. He gets it. I think, because obviously his dad was in the business. So I think he understands, the level of commitment that it takes. I'm not saying that, I'm not comparing him to Parker Boudreaux, and I'm not saying Parker doesn't. But he's one of those guys who, he could be a real workhorse for them. So I'm really
well, he's got the bloodlines. He's got the bloodlines. He signed with WWE in 2019. You actually wrote about that a couple of years ago. People might be surprised that you actually wrote a wrestling article for Banneret at one point.
I wouldn't call it a wrestling article. It was more of a football article with a wrestling angle, but okay.
Wrestling sites picked it up, so you were on wrestling sites. Parker signed obviously earlier this year. Yes, it did. Congrats. You're part of the dirt sheet. The dirt sheet, baby. So anyway, so that's cool.
So, all right. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us tonight, guys. I think, right?
We should come up with a character names for us.
No, that's okay. I'm satisfied that John Alba gave me a finishing move.
We'll call Jeff the Voice.
He apparently John Alba said that my finishing move would be called the End of Days, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. I like that. Wow. I like that a lot. Thank you, John Alba, who is no longer going to be at Spectrum News 13.
No, he's now doing independent wrestling, among other things.
Miss you. We're going to miss you, John. It's best of luck, and please don't stray too far from us on Twitter. But yeah, it's been a blast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter as well, by the way. It's Bryson Turner, Eric Lopez Elo, Statboy Drew, Jeff _Sharon. You can also follow Black and Gold Banneret at UCF _Banneret, Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com, where we are UCF's home on the SB Nation Network. We'll be previewing the Louisville game coming up. The game, of course, is Friday night. Drew's got a lot of stuff on tap. So do I. We got the
night shift after the game, Drew.
Night shift after the game. Don't forget also we have roundtable.
No weather delays, please. No weather delays.
Yeah, no weather. I think we'll be fine for weather.
Don't worry, game's
warm
not
up
in Florida.
Yeah. Don't have to worry about rain up there. We got a lot to we got our roundtable coming up out as well the next couple days.
I also say thank you to the fans for making the last week's night shift with me and Jeremy the most watched night shift ever, by the way.
Well, not ever. Not ever. This guy's trying to put himself
Bryson,
over.
You just triggered Eric. You just committed one of them.
I checked. I double checked. Did I miss something?
Yeah, that's called when Gus Malzahn got hired. That was the most downloaded.
Oh, well, post game.
Oh, well, Drew, that's trash talk, Drew. That's trash talk.
I'm hamming this guy up. You know, he's young and hungry. We want that. We need that.
So what you're saying is if this goes into a weather delay at 2 a.m., it's Bryson's show is what you're saying.
It's funny you should mention the weather delay. When I went upstairs to the press box for Saturday's game, a couple people were talking about wondering if there was going to be more lightning. And I turned around and I said, you don't bring that voodoo magic here. And look what happened. JCVD at the Orlando Sentinel was witness to it.
Wow.
Don't put that on me, Ricky Bobby.
That's a black magic right there.
If you subscribe to our podcast, of course, thank you so much. Please be sure to leave us a rating on whatever platform you listen to us. If you don't, please do subscribe to us. We are available on Apple Podcasts, and we're also available on Spotify if you're an Android user or wherever you get your podcasts on Android as well. Also, don't forget to tell any of your UCF friends about us. We really do appreciate it. We continue to grow. We are not only UCF's oldest continuously running podcast, we are also the fastest growing, and we have you, the fans, to thank for that. So, for all of us here at Black and Gold Banneret, Drew Glukoff, Eric Lopez, Bryson Turner, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you for listening. Enjoy the game on Friday night. Go Knights. Charge on. We'll see you.